I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Mary Martin. I am the ECM event manager on the east side of the state on the applied imaging team. We have Mike Heiser. On the west side of the state for applied imaging, we have Steve Mayer. And today, our special guest, I am thrilled to have Tim Talkeson with us from Highland, who's going to be sharing the presentation with me. We'll be bouncing back and forth as we go. Now, the wonderful thing is today we're talking about robotic process automation, or RPA. But keep in mind, with applied imaging, we have a variety of solutions. So whatever your needs are, if you'll take a look at the bottom, those are all the software options. We don't have one size must fit all. We have software to fit whatever your needs are, from AP to HR, on down to workflow. And of course, the big one right now is electronic forms and so forth. Now, here's some things I bet you maybe didn't know about applied imaging. Do you know we have a division called Shred Hub that can take care of those documents that need to be destroyed? In fact, if you're working from home, we even have a secure bag. We'll drop it off at your house, or you can pick it up at our office and take care of those documents from home. NetSmart Plus, managed network services. If you need help from IT, or maybe for us to take over your IT, we have the team to do that. PrintSmart, managed print services for your HPs, Kioseros, all those printers hanging around the office. And of course, backfile conversion. If you've got things in file cabinets, microfilm, microfiche, that sort of thing, we can convert those to digital for you. And today, of course, we're talking about document management, or you might know it as ECM, electronic content management. And finally, we also provide and service document and check scanners and temperature measurement kiosks with facial recognition. And finally, let's talk about our agenda for today. You're going to hear robotic process automation, also called RPA. That's the short version of that. We're going to talk about what it is. Will it work for your organization? We're going to show you an RPA demo. We're going to talk about the benefits and cost advantages, as well as what software tools are involved, what's implementation look like, and finally, time for your questions. So with that, Tim, I'm going to throw this over to you. Would you tell us what robotic process automation is, please?
Excellent. I will make a great attempt at doing that. Thanks, Mary, for the great setup there. So some folks in the audience may have some experience with robotic process automation, or RPA, and some folks may be very new to this. But I think this, it's kind of lengthy here, but it's a very good definition of what it does. I mean, everybody's got systems in your organization. You've got everything from your email systems, whether you're using Outlook or whatever you may have, to your accounting, ERP systems. You've got HR systems. You've got maybe inventory management. You know, depending on kind of what industry you come from, you've got a variety of things. You have those systems, and you may think, well, why would I need something like RPA? What is that going to do for me? Well, I like this definition of the fact that it sits on top of that IT infrastructure. It doesn't alter anything. It largely works through the user interfaces of those systems, and it does the work that a human would do, but it does it in a very automated way. That's the robotic part, right? The automation part. So it isn't very invasive. It isn't very program or API centric, although it could be. But for the most part, when we think about RPA technology, we think about it sitting on top of your infrastructure that you already have and making things far more efficient and effective. And one of the ways that I like to define this, even though we see a little robot sitting at a computer, that's not how it really works, of course. You know, the robot runs in the background, runs on a server or a VM workstation somewhere in your infrastructure, and it emulates the keystrokes and the mouse clicks that a person would be doing. Now, I always have to throw this little fine print in there. It can do things like call web services or talk through an API to some programs. That's a little bit more on the techie side. But for the most part, in the demo that we're going to show you today, really what it does is it just sort of like simulates, mimics keystrokes and mouse clicks that people do. So in those areas, we've got very repetitive tasks, and not just the busy work that nobody likes to do. There's some of that. But those important parts of your business that are very repetitive, very important, must get done on time, must get done correctly. Those often tend to be good candidates of you know, what we could use RPA to do to free up the people to do other more important tasks. And so, like I said, it's not really robots that do this, although maybe in the future that's what it's all going to be. Oh, robots doing everything. You know, the primary goal here is not to replace humans. We don't want our jobs replaced, but what we want to do is allow the technology to help us be more effective at doing our jobs. So in a lot of cases, what it does is it prefetches the work or pre-does some work. And that's the demo that I'm going to show you today too. So it queues up a person to make the best possible decision with the most information possible at the right time. So it lets your people do the real cognitive thinking kind of work, or spend more time with your customers, or spend more time on internal projects, and have that repetitive type work be very, very automated. So the real simple way of thinking about it is going through the clicking motions of working between systems, flipping from screen 1 to screen 2. Those are good candidates. And Mary's going to talk a little bit more about those things that could cue you into good candidates for RPA.
Thanks, Tim. Here's your sign, for lack of a better term. Take a look around your organization. Do you have staff that's performing those high volume, high transaction functions that are labor intensive? Those mind numbing things that require more of your hands than your brains? The process, are they repetitive, prone to human error? And here's the most important thing, rules-based decisions, not judgment-based, but rule-based decisions for processes. And is there a clear set of instructions? The really wonderful thing about RPA is it can undertake simple or even complex decisions based on those predetermined rules. And also look for people who are maybe using multiple systems. They are downloading information from one software, they're uploading it to another. They're using a number of multiple systems to accomplish a task, and oftentimes it involves data manipulation. Another one is that the staff is searching. Maybe they're having to go to a website to search for information, collect it, and then update other information. And finally, workflow sequences. Are there tasks involved there that are repetitive and manual that could be automated? And the most important thing is it's a process that has to run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
Yeah, robots don't take vacation days.
Nope. And Tim, you want to talk about this one? You're an expert on this one.
Yeah, I like these analyst slides. They throw a lot of statistics at you. That's what analysts are really good at. I spend a lot of time talking to them in my role here at Highland. But this one is sort of like a comfort in numbers type slide, is that there are so many back-end processes that so many companies struggle with automating. And that doesn't mean that, if you haven't automated your HR onboarding process or your supplier contract process, that you are somehow in the Stone Ages. No, there's many organizations in that same position right now. And this is one of the emerging technologies, one of the emerging trends that folks are using, they're looking to help them automate these processes and drive greater efficiencies in it. And so much of what we do and what Applied does, kind of comes from the document side of things. We're not just this, some organizations are just very data centric and data focused from a software company, but Applied and us and typically you folks on a call like this, we're thinking about documents. So we're thinking about that HR onboarding process and having to take applications and do verification of employment or doing background checks, looking up that information. Those are good candidates for RPA, right? Those kinds of things. Or if you are bringing on new vendors or even new customers and you have to do credit checks or address verifications and you're going externally to other systems to do that, or you need to create new entries in your ERP system for those are also good candidates for RPA. Help desk, we see a lot of customers leveraging RPA for the back-end processes of when they need to do account changes or employee changes. You've got to now grant them access to new systems or handle password changes or things like that. All of those very repetitive, important, and secure type transactions. Those are good candidates for RPA also.
Sounds good. Thanks, Tim. So here's the question. Is there an organization size involved? No. Any organization, no matter how large or how small, could be using RPA to benefit the organization. We provided a screenshot here of just some areas. We promised you to be done in less than an hour, so we didn't put everything here, but I wanted you to know that basically these are some of the areas that we see it a lot, and I gave you some examples with IT, of course, manufacturing, from inventory management all the way to the orders and invoicing and contracts management part of that, accounting, finance, HR. Now, if you don't see yourself here somewhere, please, the list is endless. Odds are very good that there is RPA needs within your organization that you may not be aware of. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go. But I kind of wanted to throw this out there. So if you see yourself, this will give you an idea for that part of it.
RPA is a tough thing to demo because largely, like I said, it happens behind the scenes. It runs on a server in the background, and it does the work that people would be doing, but does it, behind the scenes, so to speak. So, but I'm going to try and show you a little bit of that. Here's the scenario I want you to immerse yourself into, okay? You work at a healthcare institution, a hospital, something like that. And your job, or the job that you're responsible for at your company, is making sure that on a regular basis, we are doing licensing checks or physician credentialing type checks of those healthcare providers within our organization, doctors, nurses, anesthesiologists, all those sort of folks. A very important role in that organization is making sure that the people that are providing care are licensed, are insured, are certified, or all of those things. And so as a company, that's a very sort of daunting task to think that you have to keep track of that. Luckily, that information resides in other places where you can go look it up and verify and validate it, right? So in your world, you're in step one here. I've got this highly repetitive task of trying to validate on a regular basis, maybe annually or something. Are the license certificates for all of my healthcare providers valid, in good standing? And so you would, in step two there, you would have to, for each one of these, maybe there's 1,000 of them you have to do, you have to go to the proper external website or number of websites, navigate through those user screens, enter information, read that information that's on there, bring back some data, and update your internal systems with it. And so that's that classic screen one, screen two kind of work, right? I'm over here reading something, I'm looking up something in a web browser over there. Classic example of something that you would use RPA for. And that's that step three. I'm going out to, and maybe I got to go to the state of Michigan, maybe it's the state of Ohio, maybe it's Wisconsin, depending upon my company and where I do business, and maybe it's different license bureaus for different types of things. So you get the idea. I'm trying to build this like complicated story for you, but we're going to really try and simplify it. But coming from Highland, I'm starting from a system that we call OnBase. And this is that system that queues up all those requests, right? So it's my job to sit here and look at a workflow queue, and I've got, dozens of license certificates or physicians that I need to go check their credentials externally.
And just from a little order of operations, he's going to log into the software, go to the home screen, find the workflow interface, and that's kind of how you configure a bit of an RPA process. Very simple. So what you see happening here is he executed the process. It went ahead and launched OnBase, navigated to a workflow queue, pulled up an item. You'd see the keywords on the right-hand side from that item. It launched in this case, a Chrome screen and navigated to an Ohio license lookup. So, let's see if I can pause here for a second. The business function here is somebody needs to check the license for a particular, in this case, a physician, a doctor. Could be any sort of work situation like that. An item gets routed to a workflow queue, and it's a job of a human to monitor that workflow queue and work on those items. And maybe what they need to do is go to an external system to look up some information to verify or validate what they're looking at, or make some sort of a decision, or do some sort of calculation, or even do some data entry into another system. It's a very common endpoint that we create in OnBase workflows. We send stuff to a queue and give people a bunch of ad hoc tasks. Well, in this new way of looking at work, maybe what we do is we send work to a queue and we have a robot monitor that queue and do that work. So in this case, the keyword information about that item that got sent to the queue is enough for us to figure out, oh, we need to check the license for this physician for the state of Ohio and see if it's expired yet or if they're in good standing. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and grab a copy of that and put that as a document inside of the OnBase process so that we have it for later lookup. And maybe this just gets done on a scheduled basis without any human interacting at all. We know what we are, the document we have on record is 30 days from being potentially expired. So let's go ahead and kick off a timer and go through this whole process to make sure that we validate and verify that they're in good standing. So I'll kind of click play on the process here, and you'll see what's happening is the robot is actually talking to this web page, and it's going to take keyword information that it lifted from the document, quote unquote, type it into the screen and look up the particular license. And in this case, scroll down on the document, create a viewable version of that, a printable version of it, right? Go back to OnBase and update some keywords. You can see on the right-hand side, the status has been checked and updated, the effective date, the expiration date, all that stuff's been updated inside of OnBase. And we're going to go through the process of actually taking a copy of that license, dumping it to a PDF. All right, you see that happening here. And then that PDF is going to be imported into OnBase and stored as an associated document with that work item. And then I believe that's probably the end of the process. We'll show you here the document. We'll pick the doc type. It's a license certificate screenshot. We'll enter in some keywords about it, probably the license number here. So it gets stored appropriately inside of OnBase, and away we go. Now, this kind of got slowed down, this whole process here, so that we could observe it, but this would happen in the background on a server running thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of times by an unattended bot. Now, occasionally there might be hiccups in the process, and those, the bot would be configured to handle those, or let's route those to another downstream queue for a human to handle that small percentage of things that didn't flow through the standard process. And as you can see, a very simple example, but it's a great example of OnBase having to reach out to the outside world and interact with other systems. And you could imagine the potential complexity of that if we're saying, well, we have clinicians from all 50 states and have all kinds of different licenses that need to be validated with all kinds of different license bureaus. Some of those systems have APIs or web services. Some of them are very cryptic. So we're going to use RPA to navigate all those web pages or all those sites to verify that information and pull it back in.
And again, that was, kind of one very specific example. I always ask folks to imagine, if you will, your scenario of toggling, working between systems and the complexities that you have in your own organization there. But I think that is sort of what we call a kind of a classic example of how we could configure this to work with an external system. Difficult to program that, right? You don't have control of that other system. There may not be APIs or web services available, right? You could have some internal green screen legacy applications. We all still have those, that there's really no way to programmatically connect to that, or you don't want to touch it because it's so frail. In this case, we're going through the user interface just like a user would do and having to follow all those rules. Again, it's one of the benefits. Like we said, it sits on top of your infrastructure and helps you navigate there. So we could certainly talk more about the ins and outs, the technology part. We'll get to the Q&A, but that was the quick demo I wanted to run through there, Mary.
And I think to head off a question right off the bat, I think, Tim, it'll work with any software. You saw OnBase, which is an excellent product, but if you have other software in-house, CRMs, ERMs, doesn't really matter what the software is. Is that correct, Tim?
100%. Yeah, I'm not trying to give an OnBase commercial there, but no, I do like my product. But that could have originated from an inbox, right, in Outlook. I have, emails that flow into this inbox, and each one of those is a request to go fetch documents from another system or update something in your accounting system. Totally the same scenario. Has nothing to do with OnBase per se. Can work with any of those systems. And they could be Windows-based, web-based, like I said, green screen. Doesn't really matter. It's made to, that's the whole value prop of RPA. Whatever you got, it'll work with it.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. So I'm going to let you talk about the benefits and kick this one off, if you will, and the cost advantages, please, Tim.
Yep. Some of the review, kind of review some of the things we did there. It eliminates a lot of those clicks and keystrokes that people would be doing. So those people are now freed up to spend more time with customers or think about more internal projects. So maybe you can expand your business and double the throughput without adding any headcount, right? So there's a lot of way of reducing the number of folks or reducing cost that you have in a situation. You can think about it this way too. So many of our processes that we spent time building and tweaking and getting just right, well, they all went out the window when everybody started working from home, or when we really changed the way that we work here under COVID. So in 2021, I've talked to a lot of organizations that are thinking about how to re-engineer some of their processes and adapt their processes to the new norm. So we've got to think about that too. How do we reduce steps or reduce the dependency on certain people in the process? How do we ensure quality and reduce errors? Robots just do what you program or configure them to do. They don't interpret things or need specific training to handle things. It's just they run through their steps. And like Mary said, runs 24/7, right? That's another advantage is you could queue up some of this work to happen at off hours or off times, and when maybe it's just more economical or more advantage for your organization to do things. And if we're getting away from custom programming to do some of this stuff, we could move things from development to help desk internally, right? To make some changes, because inevitably these systems do change. External systems, internal systems change over time. And so instead of writing code to do that, you're reconfiguring screens, and it can really help minimize some of the utilization of IT resources. So those are some of the basic cost advantages.
Wonderful. You mentioned this was a new technology, but folks, you need to know it's really kicked up and moved into speed since about 2016. But there've been a lot of independent studies done out there on what kind of effects it's going to have on organizations across the board. NASSCOM came up with a real interesting survey. They're an independent organization. And we'll send you a link to these reports, by the way, when you get the email after this event. But they basically said with domestic business, they can expect a reduce cost by 65% through RPA. That's pretty impressive. And where it's bringing that ROI is by driving those returns in quarters rather than years. Return on investment is showing up in quarters. That's amazing in itself. Now, McKinsey is another group that did a study, and they're saying by the year 2025, RPA is going to have an economic impact of $5 trillion to $7 trillion. It's really something that is now just taking on its own. And as Tim mentioned, COVID is helping drive this, I think, as much as anything. Who's it going to affect when it comes to workers, those knowledge workers? About 9% of the workforce. We mentioned about repurposing them, freeing them up from those mind-numbing tasks so they can do more important things. And that's due to the large time and cost-saving ability that comes with RPA when you've paired it with the right processes. So with that, I have a question for you, Tim. We've already heard how wonderful RPA is. Why aren't more organizations adopting it? What's wrong with them?
Yeah, it sounds like this is just this is perfect. You just buy it and it goes, right? It
Right.
works. Well, there's some work you got to do ahead of time, and there's some hard facts you got to deal with, which is not every organization really knows what their own processes are, or they may have set some processes loose with their employees, and those employees have made them their own over time. And or said, well, you know what, it's easier for me to do it this way, or this is the way that I do it instead. And those are things you got to kind of wrangle those. You got to pull those back together and ensure that you're following standardized processes. So it can be hard for some organizations to do that at times because it is also not only an opportunity to control those processes, but adopt them and change them too. It's a good time to do that. So a lot of the old standard operating procedures may have to really be rethought and rechecked. So it's not as simple as bringing in some software and it just works. There's a lot of internal work that has to be done, and that could be a bit of a stumbling block because I do it too. When there's a lot of hard work to do like that, you're like, well, maybe I'll get to that tomorrow. And there's been a lot of get to it tomorrow with a lot of internal processes. So I think the great benefits that are out there for RPA, this picture we're trying to paint to you, starts with you and your own organization, really rethinking your processes and trying to get standardized. And that's a challenge, but it's one that we could assist you in overcoming also.
And would you recommend maybe taking one area or two or three at a time and starting with those rather than tackling the whole process, Tim?
Yeah, for sure. We've got a bit of a saying, so this may seem like a double edge here. If you start small, you're going to stay small, right? So if you just think about, I just want to do this one little small process, well, it's hard to really realize the value and grow that. But on the same side, you do have to get good internal processes and good understanding of the technology in order to grow this. So it's important that if you think about starting in a certain area of your organization, make sure that while it may be simple but there's got to be real benefit and real value there. You've got to you got to get buy-in from employees, from management across your organization. So make sure that you do start small and grow, but you pick an area where there's going to be clear value demonstrated. And that'll get a lot more people to buy in, and it will get a lot more people to be willing to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work to get ready for this.
So what I hear you say is that determining what the problems are, the processes are the key. The RPA is incredibly easy to use, but determining where the challenges are, what the processes look like, and how they function is the key to getting things kicked off, is what I'm hearing you say.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Good way of putting it.
All right, let's take a look at the what's involved, the software tools and implementation part of this. Basically, you've heard us talk about software. Applied Imaging has a couple of options for software. We'll work with you on doing a discovery to decide which one is really better for you and to how it's going to work related to automating your task. There are 4 phases to an RPA implementation. The planning phase, that discovery, what's going on, what's happening in your organization, development, putting it all together, and finally deployment and testing to make sure everything's working, the bots are working the way they should, and then finally what's happening after that, support and the maintenance phase part of it. So let's do a quick review. We've hit you with a lot of information, so let's do kind of a recap. But basically, robotic process automation, or RPA, it is the latest trend in software, but as we said, it's been around since 2016, but it's really the new digital version of a white-collar worker. It's a reinvention of how we're getting the work done out there that's manual and repetitive. And that is the key to RPA as we work on this. Now, we mentioned it uses software with artificial intelligence. They're called bots, with machine learning capabilities for those repetitive tasks, the high volumes, maybe even multiple software that you're running between out there and multiple functions. It simulates human activities needed to execute those tasks. Saving time is the key here, money, and more importantly, ensuring consistent error-free output. You know, you heard me say NASCOM, and I'll send you the link with this, estimated that RPA is going to reduce cost by 65%. Think of the problems that come with errors and what you have to do to fix that situation, and just the manual mind-numbing tasks that maybe you've even got a turnover of employees as a result of that. It doesn't replace humans. That's the important part. It replicates the human's cognitive functions, and the best part yet is the bots don't take time off or vacations. They are running 24/7, 365 days a year. And who can this benefit? Every type of organization, whether you're big or small, it doesn't really matter. It can be customized to fit just your needs for that. So I got a question for you. How well do you know every single detail about every single process in your organization? I'm going to guess that you may be surprised if you start asking questions of those people who are in the trenches doing those mind-numbing tasks, and start asking around your organization, tell me about what you do. Tell me the steps that are involved. I think you might be very surprised, and you might learn some areas where RPA can help you. You know, robotic process automation can basically stop the inefficiency monster, and it's sucking up the profit in your business. We came up with this and thought it was kind of interesting, but basically that's what it's doing at this point in time. So here's how Applied Imaging can help you eliminate that monster. Through January 31st, we're offering a free analysis of your business processes. If you're not sure where to start, what questions to ask, we can do that for you. We can help you. We can coach you. Whatever you need from us, you let us know. We're going to help you discover how RPA might improve your organization. Here's your chance to figure out if that digital bot workforce can save you time and money by eliminating that profit-sucking monster. Now, all you need to do is give us a call at 800-521-0983 or email us at marketing@appliedimaging.com, and we'll get a hold of you to schedule an appointment with that. And we're moving into questions, Tim, and I've been seeing things go a little bit crazy out there. Let me see what we've got. Oh, I'm missing my glasses for this. This is small, all of this. Okay, somebody was asking, Tim, will this be affordable technology for small business owners?
Yeah, I think so. That's for you to determine as a small business owner, but sure. The licensing costs for RPA are pretty reasonable. It's a scalable technology, so you can start small and have one bot that actually does a number of processes across your organization. I think the configuration of this, can be done by customers at times too. So, the way this software is evolved, the training is readily available, and you don't have to be a programmer to use it, like we talked about its configuration. So I think in certain situations, depending upon what you're defining as affordable in a small business owner, yeah, this could be a good fit to help you manage processes in your company cost effectively.
Okay, thank you. Here's another one, Tim. From the demo, we all saw the steps involved. What's happening in the background? Can you reiterate which of those steps required human interaction and which ones were happening automatically?
Gotcha. Good question. Well, so my simple answer is they were all happening automatically. So what you have to really think about to really understand that demo is that, I was showing you a desktop, right? Just like your own desktop. But that desktop, that operating system, that computer is running in your server room, or in the cloud somewhere. And not a person, there's no person logging in to kick off that process. Imagine it wasn't on base and it was just like an inbox in Outlook. And, as requests come into this inbox folder, it kicks off the robot to reach out to other systems and do all the work it needs to do. 100% of that can happen without any human intervention. So it's not like I have a person opening each email and then saying, okay, start the robot, go ahead and do that, and waiting for it to get done. It totally happens in the background. And then at the end of the process, maybe it sends a summary email to a manager in your organization saying, this is all the work that got done today,
Okay.
So all of it can happen in the background.
Here's another one. Somebody said, it's scary to people when you say you're going to eliminate 9% of the workers. Is that really true? Are you eliminating them?
Well, yeah, that's a question that we applied Highland. Well, we deal with this all the time because, we're always talking about making companies more efficient or eliminating this or eliminating that. So I know it's a touchy subject for sure. And some of the cliche answers can be like, well, you can repurpose those people. But I got to tell you, very few times do we see implementing of technology leading to direct elimination of jobs. Maybe it gets drawn up that way in a board proposal or something like that, but the reality is those are good workers, those are good people, they know your processes. We bring in technology, the company grows a little bit, those people find other very more important work to do, or they have time to spend on the things that they should be spending time on, negotiations with customers and vendors, working on things like that. So, I coach folks on my team and the people I work with. Don't think about this as like firing people, reducing headcount. It's allowing you to grow your business in a way that doesn't force you to immediately add headcount and hire. And that's most of the way we think about this. Folks that are investing in technology are usually happy, healthy companies that are growing, right? And so this allows them to manage those costs as they grow.
Good. Somebody asked, have you worked with any organizations utilizing RPA that assists tasks in Salesforce? I know a lot of people are using Salesforce out there for database.
Yeah, I work with one of those companies every day. It's my own company. We are a big user of Salesforce, and so many of our customers use Salesforce in all kinds of areas. You would think, well, it's really just those companies that are selling things. A, everybody's selling something, and B, Salesforce can be used in a lot of different ways. It's not just for companies that are tracking things like we do here at Highland. There are nonprofit organizations that use Salesforce and things like that. So not only do we have some pre-built integrations between our product set and Salesforce, but we have been very successful with integrating Salesforce with RPA. In fact, we've got this may seem a little crazy, but these are the kinds of things you see out there. We have multiple Salesforce systems because we've done a number of company acquisitions over time, and their data set's different than the acquired company's data set is different than maybe the Highland data set in various ways. And we need to move data from one place to the other on a very scheduled, regular basis. Well, we just have a bot do that. We just have a bot run a report on Salesforce System A, format some data, take the output, manipulate it again, and put it into Salesforce System B, and it just does that on a scheduled basis for us. So those are easy things to do with it. I mean, Salesforce is a very wide open web application, so it's easy to enter data and pull data from.
Well, that leads to another question, Tim. Is there a limit on the number of softwares that the RPA can work with in one organization?
It's a good question. No, it's not really. That's not the sort of multiplier factor here. A bot is really bound by the time that it takes to run a process and how many times it's going to run that process. So let's imagine that credentialing application I had, just to keep the math simple, it took 1 minute to run that, right? It takes 1 minute for me to take this data, go to another system, do what I got to do, bring the data back. I can run that 60 times in an hour, right? I can then run those 60 times, 24 times a day. And maybe I'm just talking to one system, right? That's fine. Maybe I'm connecting to a variety of systems, 10 or 12 different kinds of systems based upon the lookups I have to do. That's fine also. You're really bound by how long it takes for the bot to do its work. And that one bot that you may put in place initially could be doing that physician credentialing solution, and maybe it only needs enough iterations that it takes up half the day. Well, now you got a whole half of a day to do other stuff, right? And maybe you grow your system such that you've got multiple bots or half a dozen bots or 10 bots out there that you could be connecting all kinds of systems together. And that's really the sort of the variable part is it comes down to time. And, the bot's going to do things quicker than people can do them, right? So if it's taking somebody today, well, it takes me 1 minute to do this process, and I do it, like I said, 60 times an hour. That's what a person does. The bot's going to do it faster. There's less delays and wait times and wait states and all of that. And so you're going to get efficiency gains right there also. But just to give you an example of a very, very high end, we have a customer called Deutsche Telekom, and they are essentially sort of the branch of T-Mobile over in the DACH region of Europe, right? So Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And they have their total back-end bot farm is 1,700 bots, 1,700 bots,
Wow.
running all kinds of processes for their billing and their service and their new customer activation processes, and they've got all sorts of legacy systems tied together, hundreds of systems, Salesforce being one of them. This type of technology can start with that one little bot like we talked about running on one machine and scale up massively like we have there. And that's the largest bot farm, if you will, if you want to call it that way, largest bot farm in Europe running right now, running technology.
One question. That's wonderful, Tim. Okay,
A lot of answers to one question, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Good
questions, everybody. You mentioned an email being a trigger to start the process. Somebody asked,
yeah.
What are other common triggers that can get the process started?
Yeah, that's good. So that's one of them, right? We think about it from our world, our on-base product. I'm very centric around that because that's kind of how I've grown up and done that. So that's one system, that content management system. But it could be you have a your accounting system, nightly has to run some sort of batch. So maybe that could be something that triggers the bots to go ahead and do something. That's one way of doing it. Maybe you've got, we talked a little bit way in the back about a forms technology, right, Mary?
Mm-hmm.
So when folks fill out an electronic form, whether it's like a PDF fillable form or something like that, and they click submit, that could kick off a bot process. So maybe that's being hosted on a website or something like that. Could be inside of Salesforce. Salesforce can be queued up to run reports on a scheduled basis. So when a report gets generated, part of that process is reach out to the bot to do the rest of the external work to do things. So there's a lot of ways programmatically that it can be kicked off to do that, but there's also just a human. A person could literally launch the interface to the software, pick the right process they want to run, and hit run. And if that's the kind of process you run it, very periodically, or it's a end of month, monthly closing kind of thing, and you've got to validate, make sure you get all the other things in place, and then you run the process manually. Those are ways that you can launch that also.
Excellent. So I hear you say pretty much it's, how
A
do I
lot.
phrase it?
Yeah.
It's
Any way
unlimited.
you can imagine.
Let your imagination run. One last
Yeah.
question. Somebody asked, if you implement the RPA software and then you change your software systems over time, what happens? Does it incur a lot of cost? What kind of configurations involved as your software systems change?
I'm going to give you two answers here, right? Like the simple answer, like the sales guy answer, and then a little technical for you. It's easy to make changes, right? This is the sales guy answer, is that it's very configurable. So, I'm connecting to that external website and they launch a whole new web interface. It's like, boom, you come in on Monday and it's totally different. The way you have to navigate through the screens, totally different. Well, that may take, hopefully you know about that before it happens and you plan for it, but if not, you could reconfigure the navigation through those screens. And in our RPA tool, and others have these kinds of capabilities, what we actually do to do part of the configuration is record a person going through the work that they would normally do. So you don't have to be a programmer to figure out like all these screens and everything. You could do it that way, but you could also say, okay, whole new experience here. You got to navigate through these 5 screens to get to the data. You record a person doing that, and then that creates a configuration file that becomes your basis of what you're going to do going forward. So if that changes, you kind of re-record and redo your configuration. And if you're doing that, you're calling that screen or calling that application from many places throughout all these processes that you've deployed over time. Well, that piece connect to an external system, navigate to pages, get the data. Maybe it gets called like 12 different operations that you have. You update it one time to the new way of doing it. All of those processes are going to leverage that new change, right? So that's like the most. That's one extreme example right there. But to be honest, sometimes applications change their screen layout, but the underlying data structure doesn't change at all. It's just really fit and finish. It's just from the user interface, the layout perspective, colors, screen sizes, things like that. Well, we're not using very rigid X, Y coordinates. Navigate over 3 inches and down by 2 inches, and you're going to find the data element you need to lift off of there. We're actually talking. The robot software itself is talking to that user interface, and it knows the screen elements and the tabs and the fields and the buttons. It knows them through their programmatic names. The person doesn't have to know those when they configure it, but the software knows it underneath. So in many cases, other systems change, and the software will continue to work because the true underlying system really didn't change from a programmatic level.
Good.
That's my little techie. So it depends, and proper planning helps prevent some of that stuff. But being that it's very configurable software and it's made to connect all kinds of systems together, this is a very cost-effective way to do that, as opposed to hard-coded programming, right? And in which you are then looking at reprogramming over time, and that becomes a difficult cost.
Right. I said there was one last question. That was it, but I do have one more question that jumped in here from someone. Have you identified one vertical market that's the best or better for utilizing RPA, or is it just more process driven for any organization?
Yeah, that's a good one. We think about that all the time. So I think those organizations like insurance companies, financial services, utilities, where they do a lot of high volume transactions, invoices, manufacturing companies that are buying and selling things, and inventory control. When there's high volume transaction work, tends to be, those were the early adopters for RPA. Those are the people that drove the creation of the whole industry to begin with. Like I told you, Deutsche Telekom, right? They've got all these systems. They're going to do billing and services and account activation. Those are people that were early adopters to this technologies, and those are still great kinds of areas that are still applying this technology. Some of the later adopters are maybe those organizations that are more people-centric, and I mean that by higher education institutions, state and local government, right? Where many of their transactions actually involve face-to-face interactions with people. And it's not so much system to system. I know that's not wholly representative of how they do their work, but it tends to be that way. But we are seeing those organizations like universities, state and local governments, they're, because of the way things are with COVID and whatnot, they are aspiring and driving towards more touchless interactions with their students, members, constituents, what have you. So we are seeing a huge growth area in those kinds of organizations, healthcare, where they're trying to do as much interaction with their customers as they can digitally. And so that is a bit of an emerging area where we're seeing this next big wave of automation and RPA technology take off. So I guess the short answer is everybody uses it. It's good for everybody. But, in this, 2016 in technology world, long time ago, right? In this relatively short time period, we've seen a bit of an evolution. And it's been those high volume transaction folks that were early, and now we're seeing a lot more of the, the people to people type organizations that are trying to manage their processes safely going forward.
Awesome. Tim, thank you. That was absolutely wonderful. I'm going to shoot back here a screen because to kind of remind everybody, if you want more information, or if you would like a free analysis, give us a call at 800-521-0983 or marketing@appliedimaging.com. And I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today for this webinar. And Tim, thank you for your expertise. It was great learning a lot of things from you today as we move through this. So I'd like to wish everybody a happy Thursday, and we'll catch you on the next webinar. Watch for it in February. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Mary.
Bye.